The first thing I want to talk about is to lay this framework of emotional intelligence. We're not doing a deep dive. This is not an emotional intelligence training, but there's something really important about emotional intelligence that helps us understand it as the vehicle to be mindful and present in our leadership capacities. And leadership just simply means how we're showing up and understanding the nature and quality of our presence and our impact across our ecosystems, our ripples. So some of you may already be aware that emotional intelligence consists of four key quadrants: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. And the one that is most important, the foundational domain upon which all the others are built, is self-awareness. Now, self-awareness, we're going to dig into that particularly in this session, but the other ones I just wanted to share quickly what we mean when we refer to them. Self-management is how we take the information and our experiences and respond to them. Now, either we can be skillful and respond skillfully, or we can knee-jerk react, or we can be an autopilot. But the self awareness and the self management is really important. The relationship between them is as we cultivate our self awareness, it then allows and informs what it is that we need to self manage. And those two together help us with our social awareness, how we understand what is happening with others, to others in our presence, and how we are impacting them as well. And then finally, relationship management pulls all those three domains together. And that's what we use in the leadership space, because leadership is about relationships. It is about pulling people together and in creating the dynamics for psychological safety, for leadership and followership, all of which help organizations and communities begin to flourish. Now, some of you may have heard of this research that was done in 2017 by Tasha Eurich and later released publicly in 2018. It was around self-awareness. And as part of the research study, the experiment, she asked people in the group, how many people here believe they are actually self-aware? They found that only 15 to 20% of people in the study who thought they were self-aware actually were self-aware. And here's why. We tend to do a very good job of knowing when we're angry, frustrated, tired, happy. That's the internal lens of self awareness. But the external lens is where people began to fall a little short. That external lens of self awareness was understanding, for example, when you walk in a room, how do people respond? Do they stop talking? Do they fold and cross their arms? Are they disengaged or engaged? Do they seem like they want you to be there? And so sometimes people would have conversations with people and think, wow, that conversation was great. I got all the information I needed. While the other person on the other side of the conversation may think, wow, that person was a real jerk. They gave me no time to speak. They kept fire shotting me with all these questions, and then they just walked away. There is this external lens. And what that tells us is just such a great reminder. And that is that context matters. When we think about how we show up in our presence, it matters what else is happening. Where are we? With whom are we speaking and interacting? So we have to think about awareness in this framework of context. So let me give you some guiding thoughts to consider. If we think about awareness happening in context and we imagine three concentric circles, and in that innermost circle, there's me, there's you. We sit in the innermost circle of awareness. That's where we start to think about what is happening in that internal world and how we are showing up and interacting with the external. The next layer of this concentric circles or context is others. How are others showing up? How are we being received and perceived by others and vice versa? And then finally, that third outermost ring is the surrounding environment. And all of that ladders together. The self at the center travels through each and every layer. Then bringing together and cultivating this ecosystem that is what we navigate in every day as leaders, as people in family, in communities, and even as places as simple as the grocery store. So context matters, and our sense of awareness travels through all of those uh, circles of context as we navigate our ecosystem. Now, when we think about that, we have to think about, how do I cultivate this level of awareness through context? And I got to tell you, mindful awareness is one of my most favorite expressions, because I think it actually brings in this notion of context. Now, the definition I'm going to offer to you for mindfulness is one that I think is full and rich of context. It is actually the definition that we use, that we borrow from the Mindful Nation UK report. And it defines mindfulness as paying attention to what's happening in the present moment, in the mind, body, and external environment, with an attitude of kindness and curiosity. Now, if we just pause there for a moment, people often can say, yeah, I get it. It's being fully present in the moment. It's paying attention now. Then the question is, but what are you paying attention to in the present moment? There are all these cascading things that we are often aware of. And this definition provides that context. In the present moment, we're also aware of the mind, body, and our surroundings. And then the part that people often have challenges with, including myself, is the doing that, approaching that, being that from a place of kindness and curiosity. Because guess what? No matter where we are in the world, most of us have been taught to judge. We make snap judgments all the time. We call it decisions. But actually, there is a difference between being in judgment and certainty and being in discernment and curiosity. And this definition, in context, invites us to shift from judgment and certainty into discernment and curiosity. And so when we can do that, we start to open the door for what else might be possible and what might be present. So a natural question might in fact be, how do I build that muscle? How do I start to, as a leader, as first a person, but then to bring that into my leadership? How do I begin to flex and develop that muscle of mindful awareness so that it includes context? Well, the first place, like every place we have to begin, is with ourselves. And so I want to share two studies with you before we end this first piece together. And the first study, it was done um, in across Europe and Asia. It was multi-generational, multi-gender, multicultural. And what they did was they put two Black silhouettes of the human body next to each other. And then to the right of the second silhouette, they had a picture or a video or an image suggesting a particular emotion. And what they invited the participants to do was, in one silhouette, to color in with the reds, the orange, the yellows, places in the body where they might notice some kind of feeling or sensation when they experience that emotion. The second silhouette, they invited them to use the color blue. If you experience that emotion and you start to feel a dulling or a heaviness or a numbness in the body, color that blue. And if they felt nothing at all, they would just leave it black. Now, here's the interesting thing that happened. When they superimposed all the bodies, the silhouettes on top of each other, they started to see a trend. And that trend suggested that regardless of our ethnic or racial background, regardless of our gender, regardless of our generation, that we all generally tended to feel the same sensations of a particular emotion in the same general areas of the body. So you can see in this little sort of cropped picture that, for example, happiness, how that might be translated into physiological sensations in the body. There are physiological sensations that show up in the body. So the sooner we can identify that information, the more skillful we can become in navigating our landscape as leaders, as parents, as friends, as siblings, and all other places. And here's why. Because this next study, the Iowa gambling test, tells us that we know from this research that things that show up in the body begin to influence and impact our decision making and behavior. In this particular sense, there was a opportunity for people to come into this research, and they were given 4 decks of cards, 2 red and 2 blue. Now, what they weren't told was the red deck was kind of rigged. They weren't going to win very much with the red deck, but the blue deck would help them maximize their winnings. So what they did was gave the cards to the participants and said, your job is to play this gambling game and to maximize your winnings, to win as much as you can. People began to play, and on average, at about 50 cards in, people started to have a little hunch like, something's fishy. Something's going on. I'm not sure what it is, but something's up. They kept playing. And it wasn't until 80 cards in where people started to have full cognitive awareness on average. Aha, eureka, I get it. These red decks, you're not going to win very much with them. We actually need to win with these blue decks. And so what they saw was just simply intuition, instinct starting to show up around 50 cards, and full awareness happening at 80 cards. But here's where it got really interesting. They also attached electrodes to the palms of the hands of the participants. What they found on average at about 10 cards in, that people's palms began to perspire and they just started to switch for the blue cards from red. Their hands began to perspire as they reached for the red, and then they shifted to the blue, not even aware that that's what they were doing. So think about that. At just 10 cards in, that is 40 cards before a hunch and 70 cards before full cognitive awareness, where the information in the body was starting to influence not just decision-making, but also behavior, reaching for the red, changing, switching, and ultimately selecting the blue. So here's what we know from these 2 studies, this Finland study and this one, which was done at Iowa State University, called the Iowa Gambling Task Study. What we know is that if we can identify the sensations in the body, we can help decrease and minimize the time that it shows up as a physiological sensation in the body and the time that it shows up as full cognitive awareness. If we can decrease that gap, we start to be more participatory and aware in decision-making and behavior. And holy cow, what leader can't benefit from closing those potential blind spots by being aware of the data available in the body?